The soft clatter of the train's wheels hummed like a lullaby, steady and slow, as it rolled through a sleepy green world. Outside the wide windows, the rain fell in silver threads, washing over tall trees and fog-kissed hills, blurring the edge between dream and waking. You sat near the window, tucked in a warm blanket, your breath faintly fogging the cool glass. The train rocked gently, as if cradling you, and the rain whispered stories only the trees could understand. The forest beyond was endless and deep, painted in layers of green and mist. Tall pines stood like guardians, still and calm, while the underbrush glistened with drops that danced in the dim light. Every leaf seemed to shimmer, every branch bowed in quiet reverence to the falling rain. The train passed moss-covered stones and sleepy brooks that meandered like forgotten thoughts. You imagined deer watching from the shadows, blinking slowly, unafraid. The carriage was nearly empty, just a few quiet passengers curled in their seats, half asleep, half listening to the rhythm of the journey. The soft yellow glow of the overhead lights flickered like candlelight. Somewhere down the car, someone turned a page of a book. Somewhere else, a gentle sigh. But mostly, there was stillness. You were floating, it seemed, through a forest made of dreams. You leaned your head against the window and watched as the trees passed like memories, slow and soft. The rain ran in winding rivers down the glass, sometimes forming little droplets that caught the dim reflections of lanterns and stars. You followed them with your eyes until they vanished, just like thoughts you couldn't quite hold on to. A quiet voice from the speakers murmured the name of a station someplace, small and forgotten, with a name like Willow Ridge or Fernhill. The train didn't stop, it just rolled past, and for a moment, you saw an old wooden platform overgrown with ivy, and a single lamp glowing like a firefly in the fog. It looked like a place where time had decided to pause. You closed your eyes. For a few moments, or was it longer? You drifted, gently, like a leaf on water. In your half-sleep, you imagined the train was a creature of the forest, its body long and silver, weaving through the trees. You were inside its belly, safe and warm, and it knew where it was going. It had always known. Its breath was steam. Its heart was made of rhythm. When you opened your eyes again, the sky had deepened. The rain was slower now, like a lullaby coming to an end. The forest was darker, yet not frightening more, like a soft night blanket tucked around the earth. The shadows between the trees held stories. If you listened closely, you could almost hear them. Ancient tales told by raindrops to stones, or whispered by owls to sleeping foxes. The train curved gently around a lake. Its surface was a mirror, reflecting the clouds and the pale shimmer of the moon, which had just begun to peek through the mist. Tiny ripples stirred the reflection, as if the lake were sighing in its sleep. You watched it disappear behind the trees, already dreaming of it again. A few cars ahead, a small tea cart rattled past. The scent of chamomile and cardamom drifted in the air, warm and comforting. You imagined the soft clink of porcelain cups and the hush of someone pouring tea into a mug. The train was a moving home, a quiet cradle carrying hearts through a rainy night. A gentle sway, a deeper breath, a hush fell over your thoughts. Perhaps there had once been a child on this same train, staring wide-eyed into the forest, hoping to see a fox in a red scarf or a bear sipping rainwater from leaves. Perhaps there had been an old man with a walking cane, dreaming of a cottage hidden between mossy rocks, where stories grew like mushrooms after the rain. You didn't know where you were headed exactly, and that was the magic. Sometimes the best journeys are the ones that don't rush, the ones that move with the pace of raindrops and heartbeats, where the destination doesn't matter as much as the dream you find along the way. Outside, the rain eased into a mist. The trees looked sleepier now, their outlines softened by the fog. One by one, the lights inside the train dimmed, as if encouraging the passengers to rest. You pulled your blanket a little closer and let your head rest once more. The sound of the train blended perfectly with the rhythm of the rain, the soft chuffing of the engine, the sigh of wheels on wet tracks, the occasional creak of the wood as the carriage rocked. It was like being in the heart of a lullaby made of steam and water and whispers. And in that gentle world, your eyes fluttered closed, your breath slowing, your body sinking deeper into the seat. The forest faded into dream. The rain became a song you once heard as a child, and the train kept moving through quiet woods, across silent rivers, under starlit skies, carrying you gently into sleep. You were not alone. You were not lost. You were simply on a sleepy train ride through rainy forests, and everything was just as it should be. The train had rolled on through the night, and now the world outside was shifting slowly, softly as dawn tiptoed over the rainy forest. The rhythm of the wheels had become part of your breath, and the faint hush of the rain still tapped gently against a window pane. It was the kind of morning that didn't want to wake up fully, preferring to linger in the hush between sleep and light. Your eyes opened slowly. You didn't move. For a moment, you weren't sure if you were still dreaming. The carriage was bathed in a blue-gray glow. Pale, early light filtered through the tall train windows, painting soft shadows on the wooden walls and velvet seats. A few passengers still slept, their shapes curled under coats or blankets. Somewhere nearby, a thermos clicked open, and the faint scent of cinnamon and steam filled the air. Outside, the forest had changed. The rain was softer now, like the last page of a lullaby. Silver drops hung motionless on pine needles and twigs. A low fog clung to the forest floor, weaving between tree trunks like a gentle spirit. You watched as the trees slowly drifted past, some tall and dark, others bare and bone white, like sentinels half lost to time. The train curved again, and the scenery shifted. A clearing appeared broad and quiet, with an old wooden water tower standing alone among the ferns. The structure leaned slightly, moss trailing down its sides like a green shawl. Beneath it, a deer stood perfectly still, its ears alert, steam rising from its breath. It looked up as the train passed, as if it had been expecting you. You felt no need to speak, no urgency to move. Time here was slower, like syrup dripping from a spoon. You wrapped your blanket tighter and nestled deeper into your seat, letting your gaze follow the landscape, rivers veiled in mist, distant mountains hiding behind curtains of rain. You thought of stories you had heard long ago, forest spirits that whispered through trees, of ancient paths lit only by moonlight, of glowing mushrooms and sleeping giants beneath moss-covered stones. In this quiet, moving world, such tales didn't feel far away. They felt as close as the glass you leaned against. The conductor passed by, moving silently like a shadow. He wore a long coat and a soft wool scarf, and when he met your eyes, he gave a small nod, as if to say, "Still dreaming? That's perfectly fine." You smiled faintly. The train knew you were still halfway in a dream. Soon, the forest thickened again. Ferns as tall as people lined the tracks, and gnarled branches arched overhead, forming green tunnels through which the train gently glided. Here, the rain had become a fine mist, almost invisible, except when it caught the light in sudden sparkles. A crow flew across the path of the train, its wings outstretched, rain clinging to its feathers like jewels. You watched it disappear into the branches. Maybe it was on its own quiet journey. Maybe, like you, it was in no hurry to arrive. The train slowed for a moment as it passed through a narrow mountain cut on one side. A waterfall tumbled from high above, catching slivers of light. It looked like melted moonlight falling over stone. You could hear it even through the window, a soft, distant hush that matched the rhythm of your heartbeat. A child stirred across the aisle, rubbing sleepy eyes and pressing a stuffed animal against the glass. Their breath fogged up a circle, and they began to trace shapes into it, a spiral, a star, a little heart. You remembered doing the same once, on a rainy car ride, drawing dreams on windows until they vanished. The forest opened up again to a wide marshland, dotted with glimmering pools. Strange birds tiptoed through the reeds, their feathers shimmering with blue and copper. Mist hovered above the water, and willows leaned down to drink. You felt, somehow, like the train had entered a place untouched by clocks or calendars, just stillness, reflection, and soft footsteps. Your eyes grew heavy again, lulled by the quiet murmur of the wheels and the rain's gentle song. But before you could drift off completely, the speaker crackled softly and announced the next station. Clock. The name floated into your thoughts like a secret. You imagined a tiny platform hidden in the fog, with a crooked sign and a single bench. Maybe someone would be waiting there, a cloaked traveler, or a sleepy cat curled under the eaves of an old station house. As the train began to slow, you glimpsed it through the mist. The platform was real. The sign was hand-painted and weathered by years. No one stepped off. No one stepped on. But a lantern flickered beside a wooden door, and a wind chime rang once in the quiet morning. The train rolled on, deeper into the forest again, leaving behind cloud rest like a half-remembered dream. And as the trees gathered once more, you let your eyelids flutter closed, your breaths slowing to match the rhythm of the ride. You felt the world blurred, the carriage, the forest sky end. You sank softly back into the space between waking and sleep. You were still on the sleepy train, still wrapped in warmth, surrounded by rain and trees, still traveling through a forest that seemed to know your name. And the journey, like a lullaby, continued gently on. The train moved slowly now, like it too had fallen into a dream. Outside, the rainy forest deepened, but the sky was beginning to change. It was no longer the steel gray of dawn, nor the ink blue of night. It was something in between, a pale gold mist rising between the trees, as though the morning sun was shy and waiting for permission to appear. The rain hadn't stopped, but it had softened to the lightest drizzle, like a sigh. You stirred, not quite waking, just drifting up from sleep, like a feather floating toward the surface. The train's rhythm hadn't changed, still the soft click-clack, the hush of wheels on raindamp tracks, the whisper of distant voices that sounded more like wind than words. But the world beyond the window was glowing no gentle and golden, like a candlelit memory. You lifted your head slightly and peeked outside. The forest had opened into something unexpected, a field hidden within the woods, where wildflowers bloomed despite the rain. Tiny yellow blossoms, trembling with droplets, peeked out from between silver grasses. Dragonflies danced in slow spirals above still pools of water. And in the distance, rising through a veil of mist, stood an old vine-covered trestle bridge, curved like a sleeping animal's spine. The train curved toward it. Inside the carriage, the light had changed to the golden morning light, touched every surface gently, the wooden floor, the worn leather seats, the brass handles on the windows. The light didn't shout, it whispered. It said, "You are safe here. Keep dreaming." A little ahead, in the next carriage, a man sat playing a tune on a tiny wooden flute. The melody drifted through the corridor, slow and wandering, like it had been plucked straight from the trees outside. It wasn't a song meant for anyone. It was a song meant for the rain. The train crossed the trestle bridge with a slow, thoughtful hum. You looked down and saw the river far below, swollen with rain, winding like a silver ribbon through the hills. Mist drifted above the water, and somewhere on the far bank, you thought you saw a small cabin, half hidden by vines, its chimney letting out a thin trail of smoke. Was someone there? Perhaps an old poet with ink-stained fingers, watching the train go by, or a child, barefoot and wide-eyed, pressing their face to a foggy window, just as you were now. The train whistled, low and soft, and the bridge vanished behind you. A little later, you noticed something strange outside her, narrow dirt path winding through the forest, following the tracks. It wasn't made by machines, but by footsteps, worn gently into the earth. And then, beneath a canopy of rain-speckled birch trees, you saw a figure walking, slowly, calmly, dressed in a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. They walked with their hands in their pockets, keeping pace with the train, not hurrying, not lost. They turned their heads slightly, and you thought just for a moment that they looked right at you. And then the trees thickened again, and the path and the walker disappeared into green. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. The train continued, passing a row of ancient pine trees that stood like sentinels. Their trunks were painted with lichen and time. Beneath them were small stone cairns, carefully stacked tiny towers of memory. Maybe someone had placed them there to mark a wish, or a farewell, or simply because it felt like something sacred. The carriage door slid open with a soft swish, and the tea cart appeared again, this time with steaming mugs of rose and mint tea. The attendant smiled gently and placed one on your little wooden table, even though you hadn't asked. "For the traveler," they said. Their voice was soft, almost like the wind. "You've still got dreams ahead." You held a warm mug in your hands, and the steam rose around your face like a cloud. You sipped slowly. The taste was floral, quiet, and comforting, like something ancient and kind. Outside, the rain began to slow, and the mist drifted higher into the trees, curling like smoke around their upper branches. You could see more clearly now bird nests, tucked into the crooks of limbs, ivy curling along stone walls, and even a tiny wooden sign nailed to a tree, with hand-painted letters that read, "Sleepwalker's Hollow. Keep listening." You smiled. The train moved into a narrow, ivy-covered tunnel. Next, the world grew dark and soft, lit only by the golden glow inside. Shadows flickered on the walls, as if old memories were being projected in secret languages only the train could understand. You closed your eyes, and for a moment, it felt like you were gliding through time itself. When you emerged, everything felt cleaner, brighter. Not loud, but more awake. The drizzle had stopped. The sky remained overcast, but the trees sparkled with leftover rain. Somewhere, faint birdsong echoed, and then, just ahead, the speaker crackled once more. Next stop, Featherstone Glen. You've never heard the name before, but it felt familiar in your chest. You pictured it immediately. A place of soft ground and mossy steps, where feathers gathered beneath tall trees and small glens whispered to sleeping rivers. Maybe no one would get off there, or maybe someone would return home after a long time gone. As the train began to slow, you tucked the blanket around your legs again and leaned your head once more against the window. The trees bowed gently outside, as if in greeting. The rain had left behind quiet, and the quiet was filled with meaning. The sleepy train rolled on. And so did your dream. Featherstone Glen came and went, like a passing thought, soft, slow, and full of mystery. You barely remembered the train stopping. Just a gentle pull of the brakes, a whisper of mist curling past the open doors, and the faint sound of birdsong mingling with the hum of the rain-soaked forest. You didn't get off, but someone did. A tall woman in a wide coat, her boots muddy, her eyes kind. She stepped onto the mossy platform with a small satchel and a smile, as if she'd finally returned to where she belonged. Then the doors closed with a soft sigh, and the train rolled forward once again, carrying you deeper into the rainy green world. The morning had settled now, clear and wet, like glass just washed. Raindrops clung to the windows, shimmering in pale golden light. You traced one with your finger, watching it slide slowly down the pane. It felt like time itself was moving that way, and rushed, peaceful, without needing to be anywhere else. Beyond the glass, the forest thickened once more, becoming more enchanted than before. Trees stood closer together, their trunks twisted with age, their roots like outstretched hands buried in moss. Ferns as wide as dinner plates brushed the lower branches. Here and there, tree houses peeked through the green hidden shelters of wood and rope, cradled in branches like birds' nests. You imagined children living in those trees. Children who never had to grow up, who spoke with owls and raced through the mist with wild dogs at dawn. Maybe they waved at the train as it passed. Maybe they were waving now. You blinked slowly, your breath fogging the glass again. Inside the train, the mood had shifted. The lights had dimmed to a soft amber glow. A gentle piano melody now played through the speakers, simple, slow, and dreamlike. It matched the sound of the rainwater that still clung to the roof, dripping now and then like distant chimes. Somewhere in the next car, a gentle voice read poetry aloud. You couldn't hear the words clearly, but the rhythm alone was soothing, like someone telling stories just to help the forest remember itself. A conductor passed once more. He didn't speak, only nodded, and tucked a folded note onto your table before continuing down the aisle. You opened it slowly. Beneath the fog, the road still listens. Stay soft, stay dreaming. No name, no signature, just a message. You folded it again and tucked it into your coat pocket. Somehow, it felt important. The train began to climb. The engine let out a low, steady sigh as it moved into higher hills, hugging the curves of the mountain pass. Outside, clouds drifted so low they touched the tops of trees. You felt the world change with the altitude, cooler air, thinner light, birds that flew in slow arcs through the mist, ravens, maybe, or something older. You could no longer see the ground below, only the endless sea of treetops, soaked with rain and shifting in the wind. In the distance, high above the canopy, a flock of birds rose like a question mark and vanished into the clouds. Then came the stone arches. The track crossed a high, ancient viaduct, moss-covered, curved, and majestic, like something out of a forgotten legend. Below it, a chasm opened, filled with swirling mist and echoing waterfalls. The train moved slowly, respectfully, as though remembering something. You held your breath the entire time, the way one might in a cathedral. When you finally exhaled, the train had entered a long, dark tunnel, the kind carved by hand, years ago, when lanterns lit the way and pickaxes rang through rock. It was quiet now, only the soft echo of the train's breath, the occasional flicker of candle-like lights placed in crevices along the wall. In the tunnel's half-light, your reflection met your eyes in the glass. But it wasn't just you. Behind your image, faint and flickering, were shapes of the passengers, perhaps, or echoes of those who had ridden this line in dreams long before you. Then, slowly, light returned. The tunnel opened into a hidden valley, one not marked on maps, one the world had quietly tucked away for dreamers and wanderers. It was wide and lush, surrounded by stone cliffs dripping with moss and waterfalls. Trees grew taller here, their leaves shining silver green, as if kissed by stardust. Giant mushrooms rose in clusters near the base of fallen logs. Pools of water shimmered with rainbows. And above it all, mist curled like painted smoke, catching beams of sunlight that filtered through the high canopy. The train seemed to slow not out of need, but out of reverence. You looked around. Other passengers had stirred, quietly smiling, eyes wide with wonder. No one spoke. No one needed to. The speaker crackled again, softer this time, almost as if whispering, approaching Holomere. The name made something in you pause. It sounded like the kind of place where memories gathered, where lost thoughts came to rest beside still ponds, where dreams, once forgotten, waited patiently beneath rain-soaked leaves. You saw the station, now half hidden by vines, shaped like a stone circle with a bench in its heart. A lamp hung from a crooked branch above it, swaying gently in the breeze. The train didn't stop. It only passed through slowly, as if giving everyone time to see it. As it disappeared behind you, you felt a strange calm settle over your chest, like you'd just passed a place you once knew in another lifetime, or perhaps would visit in this one, when the time was right. The train pressed on, weaving deeper into the heart of the rainy forest. You pulled the blanket higher and curled into your seat once more. Outside, the mist rose again. The rain began its gentle tapping. The train swayed like a cradle, and somewhere between Holomere and the next dream, your eyes closed again, and you slept.
The rain returned quietly in the night. You didn't wake when it came. You only stirred a little, turning slightly in your seat, pulling the blanket closer around your shoulders while the mist thickened and the clouds wept soft, silvery tears onto the forest below. The train pressed gently on, its rhythm like a lullaby made of wood, steel, and time. Outside, the forest had deepened into something even older. Trees here were not just tall, they were in wide trunks rose like pillars in a cathedral of green, their bark etched with moss and forgotten runes. Ferns swept across the forest floor like green waves, and here and there, between roots and fallen logs, you could see the glimmer of tiny lanterns' lights that floated mid-door, pulsing like the heartbeat of the woods. No one could say if they were fireflies or something else. Inside the carriage, the mood had softened. Lamps glowed faintly golden. Curtains swayed gently with the movement of the train. Some passengers slept curled up in pairs. Others simply watched the rain choir, thoughtful, peaceful. You sat very still, awake, but dreaming. There was something about this part of the journey, Hakinafash, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, as if the train had entered a realm between one world and another, a space that didn't exist on ordinary maps. The train slowed. You leaned your head closer to the window and saw a small sign standing alone beside the tracks. It was carved from old wood, rain-darkened, with letters faded from time. There was no platform, no station, only a wooden path that led into the trees. And busy day. Itafika stood beneath a dark green umbrella. They were dressed in a coat of deep brown boots, muddy from the forest floor, and a scarf tucked high against the mist. They didn't wave. They didn't step forward. They just watched as the train passed by, their face calm, almost unreadable. You wondered who they were waiting for. Or maybe who they had just said goodbye to. The train picked up speed again, the trees rushing past in a blur of deep green and fog. You drifted for a while, not quite asleep, not quite awake. You dreamed of doorways made of vines, of bridges spun from spider silk, of a fox with golden eyes who walked beside the train, always just out of reach. When you opened your eyes again, the rain had slowed to a misty drizzle. The trees were changing. They stood farther apart now, as if making space for something. The light was shifting to more blue than gold, more reflective. You saw large pools of water scattered between the trunks, perfectly still, like mirrors laid across the earth. The reflections were so clear that you could no longer tell which way was sky and which was ground. The train moved more slowly here, as though gliding over a dream. Then came the reeds. Tall, rustling plants surrounded the tracks, waving gently in the mist. You passed a row of small wooden huts built on stilts above the marsh, their windows aglow with quiet amber light. Smoke curled from their chimneys, and figures moved slowly inside, making tea or tending fires. Their lives, it seemed, unfolded in time with the rain. Somewhere overhead a heron flew by, its long wings brushing the treetops. You heard a soft knock. You turned. It wasn't the door. It was a child barely 7 or 8 standing in the aisle with a shy smile, clutching a worn notebook to their chest. "Are you the one who writes stories?" they asked. You blinked, unsure how they knew. The child stepped closer and held out the notebook. "Could you write something in here? Just one line for the journey." You took the book gently, turned to the lost blank page, and wrote, "Even in the rain, the heart knows the way." The child beamed, hugged the book, and tiptoed back to their seat. A quiet moment passed. You turned your eyes back to the window, and that's when you saw it. Her deer, standing alone in the rain. But this one wasn't ordinary. Its antlers shimmered with droplets of light like stars, caught in a web. Its eyes were dark and calm, and around its neck was a simple ribbon, the color of moonlight. It watched the train pass with quiet grace, then turned and disappeared into the forest, vanishing like breath on glass. You let out a quiet sigh. The train began to descend now, curving down a slope where waterfalls trickled between rocks and fog poured like milk through the valleys. You passed under a wooden archway carved with old forest symbols, almost as if the trees themselves had built it. The speaker crackled again. "Next stop, Still a hush filled the carriage. Even the rain paused for a moment. Stillmere! You'd heard the name once in a dream, or perhaps in a story someone once whispered on a long-forgotten night. The name sounded like a secret place, a resting place, a quiet lake surrounded by trees that remembered every step taken near their roots. And as the train moved on, carrying its passengers through fog, memory, and dreams, you felt a quiet truth settle in your chest. This wasn't just a train. This was a journey inward, through rainy forests, yes, but also through the rain within. The kind of rain that gently washes away noise, that quiets the world until only your heart is left speaking. The kind of rain that rocks you back to sleep. And so, with the mist rising once again, and the train humming softly like a lullaby, you closed your eyes and let the journey continue.
The name Stillmere lingered in the air like a soft spell. The train had entered the lake country now, where rain and reflection were one and the same. Outside the windows, the landscape stretched out in silver quiet wide pools of still water reflecting the misted sky. Soft reeds bending beneath the drizzle, and clusters of ghostly white trees rising from the lake's edge like silent watchers. You stirred gently as the train slowed. It wasn't a jolt or even a brake. You could feel just a gentle exhale, as though the train itself had stopped to breathe. The speaker whispered again, "Now arriving, Stillmere." You leaned forward, peering through the fog-blurred window. The station was barely there, a small platform of moss-covered stone floating just above the lake, with weathered posts rising like driftwood from the water. A lantern swung at the end of the dock, casting golden rings across the surface of the lake. The mist drifted slowly, curling around the base of the trees, rising like incense from a forest chapel. One passenger rose, a quiet, elderly woman with a violet shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She didn't hurry. She smiled at no one in particular and stepped lightly off the train. Her boots made no sound against the stone. A small wooden boat waited by the dock, tethered gently, its oars resting inside like folded wings. She climbed in and sat with the ease of someone returning to a familiar dream. No one else moved. No one spoke. Then the train exhaled once more, and the journey continued. You sat back in your seat, heart a little heavier, though you couldn't say why. Stillmere felt like the kind of place where something ended or perhaps quietly began. You imagined the lake as a mirror for thoughts. What would it show if you gazed into it long enough? A childhood memory, a song long forgotten, a dream you'd let drift too far away. Outside, the lake stretched on, following the train, as if reluctant to part. The water was so smooth it looked unreal. Trees leaned over it, their reflections perfect and still, their limbs softly dripping with rain. Somewhere, a heron stood in the shallows, motionless, a statue sculpted from silence. Inside the train, a quiet melody had begun playing again, low cello notes, drifting like fog through the air. The kind of music that didn't want to be heard, only felt. You let it fill you, blending with the scent of wet earth and old wood. You drifted again, not quite asleep, not quite awake. In that space, thoughts came like ripples on water. You remembered a night from years ago, curled beneath a blanket, listening to rain tap against the roof. You remembered the feeling of someone brushing your hair back gently and whispering, "Sleep now. The world will wait." The train curved slowly around the lake. A small hill rose beside it, crowned by a weeping willow. Beneath its cascading branches sat a bench carved from stone, and beside it, an open book rested on a blanket of moss, pages fluttering slightly in a breeze. No one was near, yet it didn't feel abandoned. It felt preserved, like the forest had decided to hold it in place for someone who would one day return. A few carriages ahead, you noticed a window had been opened just slightly. Cool, damp air flowed in, carrying with it the scent of pine and the sweet trace of blooming lily. It smelled like the kind of morning you don't want to disturb with words. A fox darted between the trees. You caught just a glimpse of flash of russet fur, a flick of a white-tipped tail, then it vanished into the underbrush. But it left something behind. A feeling, a pulse of wildness, of untamed joy. You felt it ripple through the quiet. The forest had grown softer now. Not in size or shape, but in spirit. Trees leaned a little closer to the train. Ferns brushed the windows. The rain, though still falling, had become finer, like dust from clouds. It didn't soak, it kissed. The speaker murmured again, approaching. Juniper Rest. You smiled at the name. You didn't know why. Maybe because it sounded like something kind. A place to pause. A place to take off your shoes and feel the earth beneath your toes. You pictured a tiny cabin tucked beneath low branches, with smoke drifting from its chimney and a kettle always warm on the stove. You weren't sure whether the train would stop there or simply pass through. Either way, you knew it was coming soon. Outside, the lake gave way to meadows, soft green fields veiled in mist, with narrow paths winding between tall grass and wildflowers heavy with rain. A deer lifted its head as the train passed, its eyes meeting yours for a single, timeless moment. It didn't move. It simply watched, as if it knew, as if it had seen this train before, as if it, too, were part of the journey. The rain deepened again, gently drumming against the windows. But this time, it didn't sound like sadness. It sounded like rhythm, like remembering, like rain that knew the shape of your thoughts and was washing them clear. You pulled the blanket tighter, nestling into the seat as the train began to slow again, perhaps for Juniper Rest, or perhaps just to breathe. The trees outside swayed in agreement, and you, wrapped in warmth and wonder, let yourself drift again. The sleepy train rolled on through soft rain, silver lakes, and forests that never hurried. And somewhere between the trees and time, you slept. The rain whispered steadily now, like a long-forgotten lullaby playing just beneath the breath of the trees. You were still wrapped in your blanket, eyes half closed, lulled by the motion of the train as it meandered slowly through hills, draped in mist and memory. The world outside had turned softer still, as if it, too, was beginning to dream. The speaker let out a gentle chime. Juniper Rest, it said. No urgency, no rush, just the name, as though it were being spoken for the trees to hear. You opened your eyes and turned to the window. There it was, a station so small it could have been missed, if not for the light. A wooden platform rested beneath a low-hanging canopy of juniper trees, their bluish-green needles dripping gently in the quiet drizzle. Moss carpeted the edges of the station, and old wooden benches curved like half-forgotten thoughts. A string of glass lanterns hung from branch to branch, their warm glow diffused through the fog like candlelight through misted glass. One person waited on the platform, a child in a yellow raincoat, holding a paper bird in their hand. The bird's wings were soaked, drooping slightly, but the child held it up to the sky as the train arrived, as if hoping it might fly anyway. No one disembarked. The child didn't board, but for a brief, breath-held moment, your eyes met hand. In that instant, something passed between you. Not words, not even meaning. Just a knowing, a silent understanding that both of you, somehow, belonged to the same dream. And then Juniper Rests slipped away behind the rain, and the forest reclaimed the view. You leaned back in your seat and listened. The train moved more slowly now, its wheels humming like a song made of clouds and steel. Raindrops tapped their gentle rhythm against the glass, and the trees now older, wider, draped with vines, and fog seemed to lean in closer, as if listening to the story you hadn't yet spoken aloud. In the seat across from you, someone had left a small notebook behind. It was bound in soft green leather, with the word Echo embossed in silver on the front. Curiosity, soft and sleepy, nudged at you. You opened it slowly. Inside were pages filled with short thoughts, half-formed poems, and sketches, quiet things. A pencil drawing of a curled-up fox in the rain. A few lines that read, I once followed the fog to where my thoughts had gone. There, I met myself, and we both wept softly. You smiled, closed the book gently, and left it on the seat for the next dreamer. The train entered a denser part of the forest now. The canopy above was nearly complete, letting only soft puddles of light fall onto the mossy ground below. Everywhere, it seemed, something lived, but without sound. Mushrooms in spiraling patterns. Ferns curled like sleeping creatures. Logs covered in delicate flowers that only bloom in mist. It was a world that moved, but only when no one was watching. A tea cart passed through again, moving slower than before. The attendant this time was a tall man with a beard that looked like it had grown from the forest floor itself. He didn't speak, only smiled, and handed you a mug with both hands. The cup was warm and smelled of rosemary and smoke. You took a sip, and it tasted like memory. Moments passed, maybe minutes, maybe hours. Time here did not behave in its usual way. It curled around corners and drifted between moments like mist around trees. Then, through a small clearing in the woods, you saw something peculiar. An old railway cottage abandoned, overgrown, yet not unloved. The roof was blanketed with moss, and the windows glowed faintly, though no one could be seen inside. Wind chimes hung near the doorway, made of seashells and silver keys. They tinkled gently as the train passed, even though the wind had long since quieted. Beside the cottage, a black cat sat on the windowsill, watching, not startled, not curious, just watching. Its eyes were calm, like it had seen this train 1,000 times before. You turned your head to follow the cottage as it disappeared into the trees, and for a moment, you wished the train would stop, just for a minute, just long enough to knock on that door and ask the forest what it remembered. But it didn't stop. The journey continued. And maybe that was the answer. Up ahead, the forest began to lift. The trees thinned, and a gray-blue horizon opened in the distance. You could see hills now soft, rolling, wrapped in long strands of mist, like scarves made of cloud. The speaker hummed again. Next stop, Cloudwell Ridge. It was a name that made you feel lighter, as if just saying it lifted your feet slightly off the ground. Cloudwell Ridge. You imagined a hilltop village lost to time, where rooftops poked through morning fog and old clocks ticked slowly in tea-filled rooms. The train gently climbed, the engine humming softer than ever, as though whispering to the earth beneath it. You wrapped your blanket tighter and watched as clouds thickened outside the window. You could no longer see the forest floor-only sky and mist, woven together in silver silence. In the distance, a single windmill turned slowly. Above it, birds circled, and somewhere far beyond that, perhaps, the sea. The train curved toward the ridge, and you let your head rest once more against the glass, breath fogging a little circle where your dreams had touched the world. And just before your eyes closed again, you whispered into the window, "I don't know where I'm going, but I hope it keeps raining when I get there." And the train, steady and warm, whispered back. The soft rumble beneath your feet became a gentle lull, as if the train itself had grown drowsy, content in the arms of the mist. Your breath was slow now, syncing with the rhythm of the wheels. 1, 2, 1, 2, like a heartbeat shared between you and the forest. Outside, the world blurred into rain-washed watercolor. The trees thinned into open highlands. Mossy hills rolled like sleeping giants beneath a quilt of fog. The rails curved slowly along the edge of a quiet ridge, and you saw them houses with slanted roofs, faded blue doors, chimneys trailing threads of smoke like forgotten dreams. This was Cloudwell Ridge. The train slowed, not out of duty, but as if paying its respects. You sat up, gazing out the window at the village cradled in mist. No station here. Just a wooden sign nailed to a crooked post. "Welcome, sleeper. Stay as long as you forget the clock." The train paused not to open its doors, but to let the quiet in. Old stone paths twisted through the grass, vanishing into gardens of wild tea leaves and moon. You saw an old woman on a rocking chair, knitting with yarn so thin it shimmered like morning frost. A cat sat at her feet. She didn't look up as the train passed. She didn't need to. Some part of her already knew you were watching, and perhaps had always known. Farther up the ridge, a bell tower stood, crooked but proud. Its bell didn't ring, it swayed gently, like a cradle in the wind. You whispered the name of the place to yourself, Cloudwell. It tasted like steam and silence. The train moved on. and you leaned back again, wondering if Cloudwell had been real or just a memory waiting to return. As the train turned once more into denser woods, the rain picked up, now dancing on the roof in a delicate rhythm like fingertip drumming on old wood. You closed your eyes for a moment, imagining each drop as a note, forming a lullaby, written only for the passengers of this sleepy train. When you opened them again, you weren't alone. Across the aisle sat an elderly man in a long blue coat, reading a book whose pages turned without his hand. His glasses were round and fogged from the window steam. He looked up at you with a smile, not one that asked anything, but one that said, "I see you." He gestured gently to the seat beside him. You moved across without words, sensing no threat, only warmth. On the seat between you sat a small music box made of pale wood, etched with tiny constellations. It ticked softly, clicked, tick-clicked, and, every so often, the lid opened on its own to reveal a tiny dancer twirling inside, her arms held up like she was catching raindrops. "Where are you going?" the man asked, finally. You thought for a moment, then said, "I'm not sure, somewhere quiet." He nodded as if he'd expected that answer. "Most don't know where they're going when they board this train," he said. "But that's the beauty of it. This train only takes you where you need to go, not where you planned." You watched as he gently closed the music box and placed it in a velvet pouch. "I boarded it 40 years ago," he said softly. You looked at him in surprise. He smiled. "Or maybe just yesterday. Time is strange here." Then, with the softest motion, he stood, tucked the pouch into your hands, and stepped toward the door at the end of the carriage, the one that had always been closed. As he reached it, it opened silently, revealing not another car, but a garden of rain and stars. He stepped through, and the door closed behind him. You held the music box gently, as if it were made of fog and memory. The constellations glowed faintly, like embers in the night. Outside, the forest changed once more. The trees were now impossibly tall, their trunks spiraling like staircases to nowhere. Lanterns hung from vines, swaying slowly in the windless air. Fireflies danced in spirals, and pools of still water reflected not the sky but distant dreams, like moving paintings beneath the earth. You saw one pool ripple with an image of a lighthouse on a lonely cliff. Another showed a child sleeping beneath a tree of feathers. Each vision shimmered, then vanished. The speaker above gave no name, this time only a soft chime that echoed once, then faded into the hush of rain. You sat quietly, watching your own reflection in the window, half real, softened by mist, shadowed by passing trees. The train dipped into a slow curve, and ahead, you saw a stone bridge arching over a small stream that glowed faintly turquoise under the rain. Carved into the bridge were the words, "Even silence travels." You smiled at that. The carriage lights dimmed slightly, and the train grew slower still, like it too was ready to sleep. You tucked the music box into your lap, wrapped the blanket tighter, and leaned into the gentle rhythm once more. Somewhere far ahead, the forest opened into stars, and the train kept going. The train now whispered through the heart of the night. Rain traced silver trails down the windows, and beyond them, the forest had transformed again. It was no longer merely trees and mist, it was memory itself, stretched into branches and shadows. Each tree glowed faintly at the edges, as if wrapped in soft candlelight. The air shimmered, not with cold, but with something softer, like the hush that follows a lullaby. You felt the weight of the music box in your lap, warm and pulsing faintly, like a living heart. It hadn't opened since the old man gave it to you, but its presence was enough. Every so often, you thought you heard it hum, not music exactly, but a deep, peaceful sound, like wind through reeds. The train passed over a narrow wooden trestle, high above a fog-laced gorge. The water below wasn't visible, only its sound, a deep, slow rhythm, like distant waves rolling over dreams. The carriage lights flickered, and for a moment, everything went still. The kind of stillness you only find at the edge of waking. Then, the next station came into view. But this was no village, no signpost, no platform, just a clearing in the forest, gently lit by hanging lanterns. Moss carpeted the ground, and low stone walls curved in concentric circles around a central tree, massive, ancient, its bark silver blue, its roots deep and silent. You felt the train slowing, though the speaker made no announcement. No one else stirred. The doors opened with a sigh, and though no voice called you, you felt the invitation. You stepped out. The air was heavier here, full of scent-wet bark, old leaves, and something like lavender and cinnamon. You walked slowly toward the tree, your footsteps muffled by the moss. In the center of the clearing, beneath the massive trunk, sat a wide stone bench, its surface engraved with spirals and stars. You sat all around. The forest watched not with eyes, but with presence. The tree above you creaked softly, and one of its leaves, a silver one, drifted down into your lap. It glowed faintly, then faded. And then you understood. This place was not a stop. It was a mirror, a dreamland for the part of you that had forgotten how to listen. You closed your eyes, and the tree spoke not in words, but in memories. You saw your childhood window, rain falling against the glass. You heard your mother's humming from another room. You remembered the first time you fell asleep on a moving train, heart full of wonder. You saw the face of someone you missed, and they smiled. You felt yourself softening, releasing the weight you hadn't realized you carried. Time folded in on itself like paper, and when you opened your eyes again, you were back in your seat. The door to the carriage had closed, and the clearing had vanished behind a veil of trees and fog. The train had moved on. The music box sat still and open in your lap now. The dancer twirled slowly, her arms raised. Her motion matched to the rhythm of the train. But something was different. You were different. Calmer, lighter, a little more whole. Outside, dawn hinted at the edges of the sky, pale blue, lifted from the horizon like a secret being gently revealed. You leaned your head against the window again, the glass cool and familiar. And this time, as your eyelids closed, you didn't fall asleep. You drifted, carried by the forest, carried by the train, carried by the soft rain that never stopped singing. It arrived as a hush, not a declaration, a soft light seeping through the edges of the misted windows, brushing your face like a mother's hand. The forest had changed once again, as if in response to your dreams. The trees outside were golden now, from leaves, but from the gentle spill of dawn, turning every drop of rain into amber. The train exhaled a long, slow breath of steam as it curved around a final bend. You sat quietly, music box closed and resting in your lap. You hadn't wound it. You didn't need to. Somehow, its silence was music enough now. Your body still hummed with the rhythm of the rails, but something inside you had stilled. You looked out the window. The forest was thinning, the trees making way for hills bathed in soft light. Small cottages dotted the meadows, billow smoke rising from sleepy chimneys, the hint of breakfast fires lit in distant kitchens. A dog ran through a garden, chasing morning shadows. Somewhere, a rooster crowed, but it felt far away, like a sound from another world. The loudspeaker crackled gently. Then a voice, not mechanical, not rushed, just soft. Final stop approaching. Time to rise gently. Not fully, just enough to carry the dream with you. You smiled. The words made no demand. There was no hurry here. The train rolled into a clearing. A wooden platform curved along a stream, its stones covered in moss, its waters glistening with light. A wooden sign hung gently from an arch of ivy, painted in soft white letters. The edge of waking. You stood slowly, the blanket slipping from your shoulders like the last moments of a dream. The other passengers stirred too, but not all. Some remained curled and peaceful, wrapped in slumber, destined to ride deeper still. You stepped off the train. Your shoes touched wood. Cool, damp, real, and yet soft. The air smelled of tea and pine and yesterday's rain. Ahead, a winding path disappeared into mist. It felt familiar, though you'd never walked it before. You looked back once. The train waited. Steam drifted from beneath it in slow, swirling motions, almost like breath. And then, without a sound, it began to move again. No engine roar, no iron screech, just motion. It glided quietly back into the trees, vanishing like a forgotten lullaby. You watched until the mist swallowed it whole. Then, for the first time, you noticed something beside you. A small wooden sign stuck into the ground. It read, "Carry the stillness, let it bloom." You took one step forward on the forest path, then another, and with every step, the world didn't grow louder. It grew clearer. Raindrops still kissed the leaves above. The wind still sighed through the branches. And your heart, once tired and tangled, beat softly now, in tune with something older, gentler. You had arrived, not at a place, but at a peace. A quiet that you could take with you, no matter where the roads led. And as you disappeared into the rain-dappled forest, the last echo of the train's whistle curled faintly through the air. Soft as a promise, warm as a memory, still as sleep.